One of the principal sponsors of today's event is APL Window Solutions, and I went up to introduce myself to Philip Negus, who is going to be introducing our keynote speaker today, and realised that way back in the day when I was still swinging a hammer, I did some business with Vantage Windows back then and knew Philip from back then. So it is my great pleasure to welcome Philip to tell us a little bit about what APL Window Solutions and Profile Group are doing.
When something is made well, for over 50 years, it's made to last. It's made to be used for generations and thought through from the inside out. It's made to protect the things that matter most. It's made with heart and intent. It's made here for here. It's made for life. Made to always look forward for the environments we live, work, and play in. Thermal Heart Plus Windows and Doors.
Kia ora. We began our sustainability journey over 8 years ago when we were introduced to Jerome Partington, not sure if Jerome's in the room, who is the Sustainability Manager at Jazzmax and has recently received an NZIA President's Award, so kia ora, Jerome. I'd like to share with you some facts about aluminium, not necessarily about APL just at the moment, and aluminium in New Zealand and why it continues to be a good choice for our environment and to support sustainable building practices. New Zealand Aluminium Smelter at Tiwai Point produces about 330,000 tonnes of aluminium every year across 4 product lines and 26 different alloys, with 90% exported to overseas markets, generating just 2 tonnes of carbon per tonne of aluminium produced, when the world average for smelting aluminium is 13 tonnes of carbon. It's one of the cleanest smelters in the world for producing aluminium and can produce aluminium that is 99.9% in purity. And whilst it consumes vast amounts of energy to smelt aluminium, once it has been made, it only requires 5% of its original energy to remelt it into something else. Tiwai is unique in the fact that it is powered by a renewable resource, which of course is Manapuri Power Station, and it draws 85% of its power from Manapuri. Aluminium is an infinitely recyclable material, doesn't lose any of its characteristics. 75% of all aluminium that was ever produced is still in circulation today. Sadly, nearly all of the plastics ever manufactured are still with us. It's almost one of those products that we wish we hadn't invented. Aluminium's versatility is quite staggering. It's used in smartphones, laptops, flat screen TVs, cars, bikes, bullet trains, planes, and even spaceships. Aluminium alloys have unique properties of strength, lightweight, and ductility and corrosion resistance that are used in many applications and is indispensable in certain industries. For fairly obvious reasons, APL maintain that its use in the construction sector is important and well justified. Aluminium windows have attributes of span, scale, strength, functionality, and aesthetic capacity that alternative materials have difficulty matching. Modern architectural trends and practices would be significantly impacted if exterior aluminium drawing was not available. At APL, we have a responsibility and an opportunity to make sustainable choices, and over the last few years on our sustainability journey, we've laid the foundation and have mapped our road ahead. This includes certifications that we're proud to have worked towards: Totu carbon reduction, declare status for all of our products, and our own EPD documents. NZGBC has been an important part of this journey, and we're proud to have an ongoing partnership and with aligned visions for the future of New Zealand's construction industry. Today, we're pleased to introduce the guest speaker, Rob Pannell. Rob is a leading voice on low energy and low carbon building and has been instrumental in bridging the gap between industry and the UK government to transform how they design and build more sustainability. Please welcome Rob to the stage.
Thank you, Philip. Should have put my running shoes on for this morning. Very busy start to the day. Just had a long chat with the minister to see what we were going to talk about today. So, guys, thank you for inviting me all the way from the UK to come here and chat to you today. I'm going to chat to you. It's going to be my style, so not too formal. So if I stand in front of the screen, I get excited, so be it. You just have to look at a different screen. So who am I? Rob Pannell. Interesting background. I was talking to colleagues earlier about how I actually started in this journey. 37 years with a major house builder in the UK. Started off in the junior ranks as an engineer, and then became a national director. As a national director, I was actually responsible for design, construction, and sustainability. And to be quite frank about it, when I was in the house building sector, didn't really know much about sustainability. I thought, all these tree huggers, we used to have a lot of tree huggers in the UK, and it seems, what a waste of time they are. They don't know about reality, about making money. This is what I was employed to do, make money for my company. But I actually then got involved in actually presenting the company's credentials, green credentials, to shareholders. And the shareholders were actually interested in what we were doing as a company. And I suddenly realized we weren't doing that much. So I'm a strategist. So I introduced a strategy to make the company greener. And along with other companies who also realized that the shareholders are now asking, what are you doing as a company to make things better for the world, for individuals? And at that point, I think it became obvious that I need to become greener myself. I used to have a rude slide many years ago, not allowed to do it anymore. I introduced my wife with her green hair. She's gone green, brilliant. No, I was not allowed to do that anymore. So that was my 37 years. I was then invited, strangely, by a government initiative. A minister said we need a heavyweight from industry to take forward a certain project called the Zero Carbon Hub. And I had no idea what this was about, and I didn't really understand what this job involved. They said, look, we want to second you, Rob, for a year to join us on this journey of achieving zero carbon homes by 2016. And I looked at it and I thought, actually, quite interested in this sustainability. I'm going to become a tree hugger. I'm going to sell my Range Rover and maybe get something a little bit more energy efficient, low carbon. I've done some other things since I did that role. I became a technical and quality advisor to a manufacturer who builds homes in a factory, totally finished in a factory, including the carpets and curtains and everything else you'd expect. Brilliant product and probably the way forward. All timber, including the floor, really low embodied carbon, works really, really well. When I have some time, I also lecture at Bath University to my students, and I also examine them at the end of their studies. And I've just completed that actually last month. So quite a spread of information about me, but I just wanted to touch on one thing actually before we move on to the main point of the day, and that is if it works. Help me if it's not working. Here he is. My relation. King Charles, yeah. Actually, can't prove it. I haven't had a DNA test, but I actually believe there is a true story behind this, and I haven't got time to tell it today. But anyone wants to talk to me over lunch about my royal past, then that's fine. And I did actually meet Prince Charles, and we talked about the sustainability and his interest in this topic. He actually is probably the greenest king around the world. He's absolutely, in the UK, he's led to development of hundreds of new homes some years ago. He's been on this journey for a long time. I hope he convinces ministers in the UK that they must do even more than we're already doing, and we're already one of the leading leaders in this field as we speak. Great guy, met him. I converted a church into a homeless centre with 12 bedrooms, all free of charge to the local community, and he opened it. I asked him to come down, rang him up, "Hi Charlie, how you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'll pop down and open it for you, Rob." "Yeah, no problem." It wasn't quite like that. I also met his son, Prince William, at the same occasion, another great guy. And I said to him, "What are we going to do tonight? Can I have a few pints with your mates?" "Well, we're not allowed to do that, Rob," he said. Anyway, let's move on to the function of the day. What I'm here is not talk about royalty all the time. Struggling with the clicker, must be me, because nobody else had a problem. Aha. Look, we have choices. We have choices in this room. I'm talking to many of the converted here. I love to speak to a room full of those who do not believe, but each country has its own climate challenges. And we have to think about that from an individual perspective, whether you're in Queenstown, in New Zealand, or whether you're in Auckland. The challenges are different. I was down in Queenstown just a few days ago looking at the shrinking glaciers and thinking, my goodness, this is real. I actually had the opportunity to speak to a helicopter pilot who said, well, I've been just watching these things shrinking year on year on year. So it is happening. We need to do something about it. But what works in the UK does not necessarily work for New Zealand, but the ambition will. If we have the ambition, the drive, the want to do it, the feeling we want to be there and do it, we can be bold and win gold. We really need to be thinking about that. Okay, so what does this even mean? It means that we're going to get hot, guys. I don't give two hoots. I'm trying to be politically correct. I don't give two hoots about the 1 to 2 degrees we're going to retain a problem. We won't have a problem if it's 1. We have a problem. We will expect a temperature change over the next years to the end of the century of 6 degrees in the UK. Some parts of the world are looking at 9 degrees. I don't know the calculation for New Zealand. I'm sure you've already studied it and found out what your likely temperature change is going to be. 6 degrees, guys, is hot. Today's temperature, 18. I don't know what it is. Andrew probably tell me, but it's probably about 18. Suddenly it's 24 in a few years' time. The homes we build today will not cope with that 6 degree temperature change. Something that we realized when we started on this journey. Do not forget this little spike here. 2003, 70,000 people died in 2003 across Europe from that heat wave. It was so hot. I was in south of France and we were all stood in the swimming pool. We couldn't actually lay in the water because there was too many of us in there, but we were all stood in the water trying to keep cool. It is serious and we should do something about it. So in the UK, who are the carbon culprits? Well, the built environment actually is about 30%, quite high. I know in New Zealand, I think agriculture is about 50%, and your built environment slightly less. It doesn't matter what size it is, we have to start somewhere and do something. Residential in the UK is about 15%, and business is about 17%. Let's drill down into what that actually means. We're looking at the house typically 21% for water, hot water, and 53% for space heating. These are big figures. So 3/4 of all your energy, your carbon production is going to come from just those two elements. So I say to my kids at home, oh God, turn the lights off. It's like Blackpool illuminations here. And they say, oh, okay, turn the lights off. But actually, it's not as critical as wasting hot water. And I've actually changed my technique on how to wash up these days. So it is quite important we consider those bigger aspects first before we look at other things. Also, I'm not going to talk about the industry side, the hospitals, the schools, the offices, but there's a good explanation there if you want to read it later. One of the things there's a huge opportunity for New Zealand to do is to tackle this embodied carbon problem. Something that the UK has been a bit slow to take. We import a lot of our timber. In fact, most of our timber is imported, probably from New Zealand, actually. Let's get amongst this. Let's really lead if we can do nothing else but today, we all come out of this room saying we're going to start to focus on something big, and one of those elements is embodied carbon. Andrew's team is already working very hard on this subject, and I'm delighted that actually he's going to be leading from the front and saying embodied carbon is an easy win for us today. I'm going to take you on a quick tour of the UK's history, not going back to too many centuries, but I'm going to take you back to 2006, and the government at the time said, housing supply is a problem. We have a problem. We need to look at it, but we want housing, not just the housing supply looked into, but we want to make sure that the energy supply is under a sustainable umbrella. So we need it to be sustainable. So they've commissioned a guy called Calcutt to do a report, and he published it in a year later, 2007. One of the things that he was asked to look at was achieving high standards of energy efficiency and sustainability as set out in a code, and progressing to a zero carbon standard by 2016. So this is in 2007, he's giving the whole of the UK notice. That was the brief from government, that we needed to move to zero carbon standards by 2016. I've just had time with the minister just now, Chris, and with Andrew, talking about this is something that any government should want to do. Interestingly, the one that we had, our governments changed colour from red to yellow to blue. They all remained committed to this journey. In the Calcutt report, he actually stated quite simply, government needs to give a strong and sustained commitment to regulate in order to achieve zero carbon 2016. The government's to define what zero carbon means. How many in the room actually can do? I don't think anybody in the room can honestly say, I'm going to have a go at defining zero carbon. Don't believe anyone can. I can't even now. I've been doing this job for a few years. I'm 21, but won't mention that today. We also needed to ensure a regulatory framework for zero carbon verification by the building control teams. So they can actually verify that what we designed has actually been built, and that was critical. And he also said we ought to have a delivery unit to make sure we monitor, coordinate, and guide the zero carbon program. And that was his report back to government. And on the back of that, the Zero Carbon Hub was born. Our logo was zero carbon. Never actually, when I started doing the work, I didn't understand, because it was never quite zero. Zero is a very aspirational journey. But to talk about something low carbon, low energy is where I talk about it. But we were called the Zero Carbon Hub, and to undo it was going to be complicated. We had 4 purpose strategic objectives. Facilitate the mainstream delivery of low and zero carbon homes. This isn't some we're going to just do some one-offs. I know there's people in the room today that have built passive house and other low energy, low carbon buildings. But if you're going to do it mainstream, you have to think about a lot of other factors. You have to provide leadership and create confidence. You have to reduce risk and clear obstacles. And you have, probably the most important of all, disseminate information to advise people, whether they're manufacturers, whether they're tradesmen, whether they're government ministers, whether it's individuals in this room. We need to take people on a journey. And I always talk about a journey to Moscow. People don't know the relevance of Moscow anymore, but it's very important over the last centuries. It critically needed a collaboration between government and the construction sector. So what we actually had was a brief from government. And government said, this is what we think is your brief. Did you remember I said earlier that Calcutt was asking for some clarity on what you actually wanted, government? And government gave me this triangle and said, we want you to deliver this by 2016. Energy efficiency with a building fabric performance that was actually super duper, wonderful, marvelous, great, fantastic. But it also wanted it to be looking at the carbon compliance element. In other words, the relevance of the heat and power generation, how we might manage that. And we had this something called allowable solutions. For your benefit, carbon offsetting will be fine. Just imagine it as carbon offsetting. addressing the carbon emission reductions that are difficult to achieve on site. Some sites were easy, some sites were difficult. We recognise that. So we had a look at the delivery programme, and I put everything down I could think of, and I gave it a RAG status, red, amber or green. And some of it we thought was reasonably easy, which was the fabric of the building. We thought we understood that quite well. Other elements like the carbon offsetting allowable solutions, we thought, well, don't really know what it means. So I don't know what that, how we're going to do that. So we actually RAG status it. But there was a couple of other things we realised that we hadn't planned for at all. And that's the effect of overheating. The 6-degree temperature change, guys, is going to affect us all. And what does it have an effect on the building? It causes overheating. And that's typically what we have to deal with. We also had something called the performance gap. Now, talking to some of Andrew's team only yesterday, saying, well, actually, it may not be as serious or even as difficult as we see. But we saw it at the time as a very big problem. And I met a chief exec of a manufacturer who actually might be, chief exec's not outside, but I think the product might be. And he said, oh, yeah, well, I put all my products through the test, and if I get to a point, I passes it. So, well, that's not really quite how it is it? So I see that even some of the products were over-egging what it can actually achieve in reality, and that was very, very serious because we had to really look at a number of factors on how to manage that going forward. Whenever we look at opportunity, we should be saying to ourselves, what's the energy strategy? But it wasn't just about energy, it was about a lot more than that. It was about energy, it was about actually how do we build this new low energy, low carbon home. Let's have some examples, please, on how this might work in reality. And hang on a minute, is the consumer going to understand this building? There's one or two gentlemen in the room I've spoken to recently, the last couple of days, saying, yeah, it's like a machine. I have to drive my home to make it work efficiently. So there was issues around the consumer. So we appointed a consumer expert who was going to be able to understand the technology and talk about how the occupant may or may not be able to use it. And that was really important. And this one here, and this one probably I felt was the most important, skills. Every architect had to be retrained. Every engineer had to be retrained. Every tradesman had to be retrained, re-educated, advised, informed on how to actually achieve this journey. We don't get retrained very easily. I know the architectural practices, many do, but it's not that common. We had a delivery program. We were looking over time of how many kilograms of CO2 per metre squared per year we were going to reduce through regulations. We then started to model it on different house types, size of houses, shape of houses. We called form. We say, is it on the gas grid? Has it got gas available off the gas grid? What are the solutions? What are we going to do? And that then started a spreadsheet. And when I described, we call it a Dulux chart. If we had green on it, we had red on it, we had amber on it, it was as big as that. The options of the house types, the options of the solutions was massive. And we had to wind that back down. So the things we started to look at was continuous insulation. Passive house will tell me, I don't know how many people understand passive house, but it's a methodology of achieving this continuous envelope of insulation. High performance components, we just heard from a window manufacturer that is looking at this future, what will his product be that will actually serve the best benefit to the product we're going to produce in the future. Air tightness, we have actually driven that down from 10 to 5 to 3. And that has been a huge challenge because everything tends to leak when we build it. But that became important. We're not going to go lower than 3 because we are worried about what might happen if we go lower than 3. I won't go into that today. We did think about shading and solar design and about the thermal bridging, which is probably something that we should be aware of much more than we are. We actually looked at the U-value options. So we looked at every build element. And then we said, what is the current practice and what are we actually using as a U-value? And then we tried different specifications. In those days, we could trade off. So we could actually put 6 foot of insulation in the roof and not much in the walls. They've stopped that now. You have to do it elementally. So you have to do it per element of build. So a bit for the roof, bit for the walls, bit for the windows, etc. And then there's driving down, there's air leakage. Not as far as passive house. We're stopping at 3. So that's the detail we were going into. And I had a team of about 10 people working on this, but because it was so big, I couldn't get my arms around it as a project. So we used to put out information. Green Building Council was massively helpful in the UK with its experts, as were other organisations. We had massive challenges, oh dear. So we put the blower door in the door, which has got the most holes in it. If you think about a door, it's got a letterbox, it's got keys and locks and all of that. And then suddenly we realised, actually, that's not the best way of measuring air tightness. I don't know if you do we've got some new testing methodology now, which sends out a pulse. We call it the pulse test, rather than having anything in the door. But we were using that, and we were getting all sorts of results with air tightness. Very strange. Air thermal bridging I loved, because we had actually had an external radiator on this house. The Juliet balcony there is actually coming out as red, because it was taking heat, because the bolts that hold it onto the wall were taken right to the inside of the building, and that heat was coming back out. Co-heating tests, heat flux sensors, 5-second monitoring. We tried everything, and this is so big, guys, you need to go to this depth to make sure your buildings are actually doing what it says on the tin. Interestingly, we invented the eyeball, because we found that looking at something gave us a huge benefit. Just look at it, and is it looking right? And if it looks right, it probably is right. Do not forget the benefit of the Mark I eyeball. The performance gap was a problem we weren't expecting, and I had to put a lot of time into this to work out how do we even measure it. But we recognize that the buildings don't do what they are designed to do, not by a country mile. So I put together chief execs who were delighted to come on this journey. Chief execs of manufacturers, chief execs of house builders, and ministers as well, to say, how do we do this? Now, they were nervous because they're selling product, which is a low energy, low carbon home, which once one moved in, isn't low energy and low carbon at all. So this was making them very nervous. So they actually happily sat around a table. There's probably 10, maybe 12 at dinner. We always did it over dinner. That's probably why I'm so big. At the end of the day, they decided that we were on the right journey. Tell us how to solve the problem, Rob. We need some help on this. And we then worked through with that, and we produced a lot of documentation. And that documentation is still used by government and industry today, some years later after we did our research. Do not forget the performance gap. I'm running out of time. I always do. So much passion about this subject. I do apologize, Andrew, for going to be running over time in a few minutes. Look, problems and solutions. Overheating. Who's an expert on overheating in the room? Just put your hands up. No, I can't even see one at the moment. I'm sure someone's going to vote for me. Vote for me. I'm an expert. We've got one. We've got a volunteer. So, overheating, guys. Look, I don't understand how we're going to solve this easily. We are going to make our buildings more like a thermos flask. I hope that translates across languages. But we do need to think about overheating. The other one we need to think about is ventilation, indoor air quality. We have an increasing asthma rate in the UK on an exponential curve. We have got problems with that. Look, my comments here are simply design it right, install it right, commission it right, and use it right. Now, my worry here is that we get to the occupant who doesn't understand the high-tech technology we're putting in to ventilate their home. I insisted with government officials and ministers, leave the option to use a window. Please, 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 leave the option to use a window. I like opening my window and chatting to my neighbours. Morning, darling, how are you? And that's how I think we use windows. We also want the light. We also want them as fire escape. We also want them as part of the fabric of the building. They do 7 things, guys. They do a lot for us. We have to be very careful on our design. And if we don't get it right, what will happen? Who will check that we use it right? Next year, we're banning gas. We will no longer be allowed to use gas on any house development across the UK. They have to use a heat pump. That means their gas hob is now an electric induction hob. They do not have the option to use gas anymore. And that's going to be massive, because that is going to really impact on the way people live. So we need to understand this as a consumer journey as well as a geek journey. Now, as my micro business, Buildings Hub, it's only me and two others. They're the two geeks, and I'm just the strategy person, and that's what I do. But who will train the plumbers to fit them? If you change technologies, you must train the people to do it. And I make that point, and I can't emphasize it anymore. Communications, that was the one thing we did get right, and I think Andrew may or may not agree, but that was getting the message across to government. So I had one minister, I'll tell you a quick story, running out of time, apologies for being late. He said to me, Rob, you're just a building thug, aren't you? And I said to him, actually, I take that as a badge of honor. I actually do, I think that's probably right. I am a building thug, because I've been doing it for 37 years, and I know that profit to that industry is important. But I also recognize that we need to get this right for the future of our families, friends, and our grandchildren. So communications was key. We did lots of them. My favorite one was probably the cost efficiency guide, which actually told industry, don't be scared, guys. This is not going to hit your profits. Here's a commercial model I've done. It's going to show you that actually this is not going to be expensive to you. So we did that. We also did a couple of others, and my favorite is the Builder's Book. Inside the Builder's Book was everything designed for a tradesman. In fact, I designed the book. You could actually tear the pages on a perforated strip to give it to the tradesman while you were talking to him, to say, this isn't just about me talking to you. This is about me showing you a picture of what we're trying to do in the future. Airtightness. I had cartoon pages made, little cards of Bob the Builder. Some of you might know him. He was actually on my posters, showing you how you've actually made buildings more airtight. Really important part of the journey. A few takeaways. Was the introduction of the Zero Carbon Hub successful? And I would say immensely. Government put the stake in the ground and said, get together, guys, and deliver this objective of building zero carbon homes by 2016, 9 years hence. And by the way, here's $1 million New Zealand dollars. So they actually not just committed to wanting industry to do it, they were prepared to incentivize the industry to do it. And I match funded that from industry very quickly, because a lot of the house builders, manufacturers, and other sectors, research sectors, wanted to be involved on this journey as well, and wanted to be part of it. So they very easily doubled that money within a few weeks. Did construction costs go up? No. Shock, horror. I'm meeting ex-chairman of the Master Builders for lunch today, and that's going to be like looking at me like I'm crazy, but I'm going to hopefully have a really useful discussion, because I'm a building thug and I'm proud of it, and I want to go through how we can do it at no extra cost in terms of the house builder. Could New Zealand do this? Yes. Just needs government to set the ambition, set the scene, and set the journey. It's all it needs. I've sat with the minister, with Andrew just now, for 20 minutes, and that was the point I was trying to make. It is possible. It benefits lots of people. And interestingly, guess who gets the best benefit of this? The occupant. The occupant's running costs of that home are going to dramatically reduce from the pre-war World War II houses through to the regulations in 2006, to the regulations that we're introducing again today and tomorrow with no gas option. The running costs of homes are going to dramatically fall. Who wouldn't? That's like definitely not voting turkeys for Christmas. This is a voting common sense for our future. I think that's all from me, but just to say thank you very much. And I look forward to having any questions. We've got time for questions, or we're out of time. Where's the leader of the camp today?
I don't know that we had allowed for questions, but if you're available during morning tea, I'm sure that people
Coffee
can
and tea, guys.
And
thank you very, very much for listening to me. Better homes, better lives, and a better future. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.